We've seen a number of actors attempt their hand at directing. It makes sense why they would want to do it considering the amount of sets they are on and the want for some control. I think the best example of an actor making a successful director is Warren Beatty. Even though he has not directed many films since he's stepped behind the camera, all of them have been distinct and well made, and each touching on a classic type of Hollywood filmmaking. The first film Warren Beatty directed was Heaven Can Wait, based on a stage play about an athlete who dies before his time and is then returned in a brand new body, a successful millionaire in this case. Owing to its classic source material, there's an old-school Hollywood feel to the production, while still making it relevant to audiences in 1978, and you'll find that's a common theme in Beatty's work. Co-directing the film with Buck Henry and writing the screenplay with Elaine May, Beatty takes a laid-back and funny approach to the story and assembles a strong set of actors to work alongside him. Beatty is the star of the movie, though, as he's capable of showing his characters' changing attitudes and handling both the funny and sweet parts. This is actually a tricky role, as we're supposed to constantly remember he's in another man's body. What elevates it further is the sweet-natured romance he forms with an activist played by Julie Christie. While it is a conventional romantic comedy in many ways, Beatty and May's script is so smart and funny and charming that it rises above most entries in the genre. I particularly have to give credit to its depiction of heaven, which is unique, and I like how it's portrayed almost like an office with a ton of paperwork. I almost wonder if Beatty asked his sister, Shirley MacLaine, for ideas on how to portray the afterlife. Overall, Heaven Can Wait definitely stands as one of the best directorial debuts. However, even long before Heaven Can Wait, Warren Beatty was planning a very ambitious project, a biopic on famed socialist writer John Reed. However, he made that other film first to show he had the ability to command a crew. In fact, directing was a role he slowly eased his way into, as he started as a producer on Bonnie and Clyde, and then jumped to writing with Shampoo, before finally taking on the challenge of being an actor, producer, screenwriter, and director on Heaven Can Wait. While his first directing effort was a classic romantic comedy, Reds is an historical, dramatic, romantic epic in the vein of Gone with the Wind, Dr. Zhivago, and Titanic. And I actually like it more than those other films, and I think it's the best of Beatty's directorial efforts. Warren Beatty did a fantastic job with the scope of the piece, and while it's 3 hours, its length is never felt. Part of that is because of how well-rounded all of the characters are. Beatty actually made the unusual decision to have the exposition related to the time period and the people in the film given by real people who remembered John Reed and Louise Bryant. These interviews serve as excellent frameworks for giving us perspective on them, giving us an idea of the time period, how the story is progressing, and so forth. For the film portions, a lot of what we find out about the characters is through their conversations. Beatty and Trevor Griffith's screenplay gives them so much life, and most importantly, actually takes the topic of the rise of socialism and the October Revolution and portrays it in a way that is understandable to even people with minimal knowledge of the real-life event like myself. The acting is terrific from everyone. Beatty gives Reed the necessary gravitas, and we also feel his passion for what he's saying. Diane Keaton is mostly known as a comedic actress, but she shows her dramatic chops really well here. And this may be due to them being in a real-life relationship at the time, but she manages to have a lot of chemistry with Beatty. Jack Nicholson also gives one of his best performances as Eugene O'Neill. You can see why Beatty cast him in the role, as he makes it believable that under that drinking, there was a bite as well as a charm to him. Beatty's abilities as a director are all over Reds as he keeps the film moving as the story jumps from location to location. In addition to the historical aspects, the element that deserves the most praise is the romance between Reed and Bryant. The film beautifully portrays how they were able to overcome the ups and downs and differences in ideology. We see the influence that John Reed had on Louise Bryant and vice versa, and it actually becomes heartbreaking in the moments in the movie where they occasionally separate. The final act is especially bittersweet, with a scene where they reunite at the train station succeeding in hitting the emotional gut punch. If you're familiar with John Reed's life and you know what's happening, it's especially heart-wrenching. Combined with Stephen Sondheim's beautiful score, and you have one of the greatest love stories ever put on film. Rez, despite being a big Hollywood production, has an authenticity and sense of reality to it, and Beatty deserves a lot of credit for making that possible. These don't just feel like dramatizations of the real people, but rather like watching the actual John Reed and Louise Bryant. Even if you don't know anything about John Reed or the October Revolution or the 10 Days That Shook the World, Rez is definitely one of those must-see films that deserves to be considered a classic across many genres. After Rez, Warren Beatty embarked on yet another massive production, with a film adaptation of the classic comic strip Dick Tracy. Originally set up at United Artists and then moved to Paramount, and when Beatty bought the screen rights, he took it over to Disney. Seeing the massive grosses acquired by Batman over at Warner Brothers, Disney was sure they would have a huge hit comic book movie on their hands, and hyped it as a major summer event. And when it came out, it did okay, and now has been kind of forgotten. While I do like Dick Tracy and find it to be a very well-made film, I can actually see why. To start off, the film looks absolutely stunning. Warren Beatty was clearly a fan of the comics and wanted to recreate the look of it. The shots set up by cinematographer Vittorio Storaro are absolutely stunning, as he takes advantage of the frame to create some shots that look so much like a panel. This extends to the production designers who used very strong colors like out of an artist's inkwell at the time to create a completely unique world unlike anything seen in a movie before. The makeup artists also borrowed a lot from the comics in portraying the unusual set of mobsters that populate Dick Tracy. There's even some musical numbers thrown in, featuring a whole bevy of original songs by Stephen Sondheim, and thankfully the film never stops dead in its tracks when Madonna's Breathless Mahoney starts singing a tune. What makes or breaks this film for a lot of viewers is the story, and I think one's enjoyment depends on one's knowledge of 1930s gangster films. Beatty is clearly paying homage to those of the straight-laced, no-nonsense detective going up against a colorful band of crooks. And that's pretty much the basic story. We also get femme fatale, the good gal, the ne'er-do-well kid from the wrong side of the tracks, the trusted chief of police, and the corrupt government official. It's the kind of movie audiences would have ate up in 1930, but in 1990 it probably came off as old-fashioned and done before. However, I can see Beatty is mainly calling back to an earlier film-going time, and the movies he probably went to see matinees of when he was younger. Even the way it's edited is not unlike that of the kinds of gangster pictures Warner Brothers was famous for making way back when. Even the acting is reminiscent of those, with Beatty portraying Tracy as your typical hero cop, and Al Pacino wonderfully chewing the scenery as the head mobster, Big Boy Caprice. It's a throwback, but one I nonetheless enjoy. The story does kind of lose itself in the third act, though, as it struggles to figure out a way to properly end it. Like Beatty and the writers wanted to have one last major confrontation between Dick Tracy and Big Boy Caprice, and they were pretty much, should we tie the girlfriend to a windmill wheel? Sure, yeah, let's go with that. Due to the disappointing grosses, Disney decided not to move forward with a sequel. However, with the recent comic book movie craze, there haven't questions of a reboot, and the reason it has not happened yet is because of one man, Warren Beatty. He holds onto the rights with such a tight grip because he still wants to make another Dick Tracy movie. When Tribune Media Services tried suing him to get the rights back, he donned the yellow trench coat and hat again for a 30-minute television special, which is basically Leonard Maltin interviewing Beatty in character as Dick Tracy. And the courts decided that was enough to keep the rights in his hands.
Beatty. Making another movie about me. Yes, I've heard that.
If he did do another movie about me, that would be something that would cause me to take off my hat. To him, to Beatty. If he made another movie about me, I would take off my hat to him. Or I would tip it at least, But he might give you a better answer on that. I think you should do an interview with Mr. Beatty. I know he pretends he's not interested in self-promotion, but I'd say there's a pretty big body of evidence as to his guilt in this area.
In 1998, Warren Beatty tried his hand at a political satire with Bulworth, basically exploring the question of what would happen if a politician actually said what was on his mind. This is biting and hilarious. A lot of his points are the ones we want to hear people who work in government say, and the result serves as a strong commentary on how big companies and lobbyists influence what politicians say more than we think. Warren Beatty even succeeds at tackling subjects of race and walking that fine line. There's a nice bond formed between Bulworth and a young woman played by Halle Berry, though like the title character, there's a lot more under the surface than we might expect. Bulworth really shows Beatty's abilities as not only a director, but as a writer, and one who almost always had some pulse on the current media landscape. You almost wonder how much of Bulworth was inspired by his own desire to say the truth more in interviews when he was both younger as well as older and more experienced. Like his other films, Bulworth is very underappreciated in the grand scheme of things, and well worth a look. Recently, Warren Beatty directed a new film which he has actually been planning since the 1970s. What was originally a Howard Hughes biopic has now morphed into what is apparently an old-school Hollywood romance with Hughes playing a supporting role. While we currently don't know much about it or even a set release date, though it's possible 20th Century Fox could release it by the end of the year during award season, just the fact that it's a new film directed by Warren Beatty makes it one of my most anticipated of the year. If you have not seen any of the other 4 films I talked about today, I say now's a good time to catch up before his new project hits the big screen. See you next time.